All right, as some people are coming in, welcome to Premier. My name is Kelsey Gromas. I'm one of our admissions counselors here. For those of you joining, I do want to point out our Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. You're more than welcome to answer or ask any questions in there, and they will answer if they have any time. But without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and pass this off to Dr. Schultz, and she's going to tell you a little bit more about philosophy.
All right, welcome everyone. Glad that you're here and interested in learning more about the philosophy department at Baylor. I'm going to share a brief PowerPoint and hopefully have time for your questions. And I also just wanted to introduce you to Kennedy Wild. And she is a senior philosophy major who also majors in communication, is also in the Baylor Interdisciplinary Corps. In fact, won the BIC Spirit Award this year. And Kennedy is going to go to law school at Baylor this fall. And so that's just one of the many things that you'll see that you can do with a philosophy degree. So we'll go ahead and get started. Just give me a second to flip over and share my screen and get ready to do that. So. All right, can you all see my screen? All right, great. Okay, so we're here at Premier 2022. We're in the right place at the right time. That's good. Okay. So here's what we're going to talk just briefly about, a little bit about why you might just be interested in studying philosophy generally as a discipline, why specifically philosophy at Baylor is so awesome, and a few just ideas about how you can get the most out of philosophy at Baylor, and then we'll have some time for questions and answers. And you can start using the chat at any time you want to if you have a question, and so that way we'll have a nice queue to build up. Okay. All right. So here we go. All right. First of all, why study philosophy? Philosophers like to ask big questions like that, like why study philosophy and what is philosophy? An even bigger question, right? Philosophy literally means the love of wisdom. So you could think of that in terms of reasons that are internal answers, like why philosophy is good for you. Like Plato says that philosophy is the best thing for your soul, and it's a soul enriching activity. Okay. But we also live our lives on the basis of answers to these big picture questions that we ask, like, what is the good? What is justice? What's the nature of reality? All of those pressing questions that help guide our life. And that's really what philosophy does, is that we study humanity's best answers to its biggest questions. And it's a lot of fun in the process. Sort of externally motivated reasons is you can really do a lot with a philosophy degree. Philosophy, I guess I would say at its heart, aside from dealing with those big picture questions, which are in some ways involved in whatever field you're going to study, is all about finding the good in certainly different ways. But also a real essential part of philosophy is teaching logic and critical reasoning, and relatedly problem solving. And whatever you're going to do in your life, you're going to be, those kinds of skills really come in handy. You're going to be presented with a certain kind of problem in a workplace situation, and with philosophical reasoning skills, you're probably going to be better equipped than most people to think through various solutions to those kinds of problems. And also, I think philosophy kind of it goes in some ways like communication. It really also values the ability to speak clearly as well, and that also is highly valued by employers across the land. Also, philosophers tend to do really well on the LSAT and also GRE placement exams. Typically, like for instance, at Baylor, the philosophy graduate students actually always have the highest GRE of any of the other PhD programs. I think that's partly because philosophy teaches you how to do things with words and read text carefully, but it also draws upon principles like logic and mathematical reasoning. And so philosophy cultivates sort of both sides of those kind of standardized test situations. All right. All right, so why philosophy at Baylor? Well, one, you get to study with people like Todd Burris. He's our department chair. He's in his second year of being a department chair. I think Kennedy had him for history of modern philosophy a few years ago. He was actually a former student of mine way back in the day when he was an MA student here. And he's really just really great, really interested in philosophy department, growing it and having philosophy be a really central place of the intellectual life of Baylor University. There's also, I'm also the undergraduate program director, and so I work with Todd pretty closely in terms of what classes we might present. And I also, a couple of years ago, got a nice fancy master teacher award. So that's pretty cool for the philosophy department to have that as well. But I'm not alone in being philosophy is filled with lots of teachers who really care deeply about their students and are passionate about the subject and teach philosophy often from a really informed, academically Christian perspective. All right. So why this, which begins to move us toward why study philosophy at Baylor. Okay. Baylor, I'm sure many of you are interested in Baylor because it is a Christian-based place of higher education, and the philosophy department certainly sees itself as a strong part of the Christian mission of the undergraduate study and graduate study at Baylor too. So when you study philosophy at Baylor, you're going to actually get often very Christian perspectives, but of people who are doing the highest level of scholarship. Sometimes the scholarship they do, like you can see these books that some of us in the philosophy department have worked on. I mean, some of them are obviously about God or God and morality. I can't remember what Dr. Pruse's One Body book is about, but other people also might just do something. And this is a book that I wrote that's on Plato's Dialogues, and it's not specifically informed from a Christian perspective. So you're going to have a lot of variability. You're going to learn some philosophy that's maybe really deeply informed by someone's Christian faith, but also other philosophy that's not. So that's an interesting thing about Baylor. I also will say the philosophy department is really good at publishing books. We're a small program. We only have, I think, 14 faculty, but the philosophy faculty, we are 29th in the country for book publications overall. Out of all of the universities in the land, we came in 29th, and I'm sure we'll continue to get better there. Okay, so let's see, what else do I want to do? Where's the next one? Oh, I'll skip Victor, but Victor is, well, no, I'll tell you a little bit. He's one of our famous young alumni. He actually won the Young Alumni Award a couple of years ago. And I actually had Victor as a student many years ago, and he was a federal prosecutor for many years, but then he got interested in trying to stop sex trafficking. And so he started a foundation that works in all these different ways to reduce sex trafficking across the world. And he has really compelling statistics that his foundation, the work that they're doing, is actually making a difference in stopping evil in the world as it appears in that particular domain of human suffering. And so he's just another example of all the ways that you can serve the world by learning philosophy. Okay. The other thing I'd say just about philosophy at Baylor is that philosophy at Baylor has lots of opportunities that you can study abroad. There's a philosophy semester abroad at St. Andrews in Scotland. You could also take philosophy classes in some of the Baylor in the British Isles programs and Baylor in Turkey and Greece. And so you will be able to continue, and I think it'll really enrich your philosophy experience if you do manage to find a way to study abroad while you're here. I know the first time I ever saw Miletus, which is on the coast of Turkey now, but it's where all these pre-Socratic philosophers studied that we learn about in a history of classical philosophy. I really almost started crying. It was just so moving to see where Thales and Anaximander and Anaximenes just walked around and did their philosophy thing. It's exciting to go to the Agora in Athens and see where Socrates and Plato lived. And it just really enriches your philosophical understanding and experience when you can go do that. The other thing I'll just mention, three more things I'll just mention is that the Baylor has a really active philosophy club. There's a really wonderful student that Kelsey knows named Caitlin, and she's really done a lot to vitalize the philosophy club. And so sometimes we have guest speakers who come back for that, but other times we just have these things that are called open forums where people just get together and talk. It's, I think right now, every Wednesday, there's usually food or at least some Dr. Pepper floats. And that we actually, not just in philosophy club, but in philosophy generally, we invite a lot of speakers in from other universities. And so you get a chance to really see how philosophy is practiced, not just at Baylor, but in other institutions. And you also see how much, how well respected Baylor is by other places in the university and how excited people are to come and give a talk at Baylor and be just a small part of our community here. And there are also a lot of people use philosophy as what we call a secondary major or a double major. It's actually the major itself is only 33 hours, which is a reasonably small major at Baylor. And so that makes it actually easy to combine with other majors. We have medical humanities majors, philosophy majors, people who do pre-law, communication, history, math, you name it, it can combine really well with philosophy. Okay. And I'll just briefly mention that there are several tracks in our philosophy major. You can just do a general philosophy track. You can do a pre-law track, a philosophy and medicine track, and then there's an honors track if you're in the honors program and you want to write an honors thesis. So I think you could actually do that at philosophy, even if you aren't in the honors program. You could still write a thesis if you wanted to. And so those are tracks you can choose. And then regardless of the track you're in, we have a really strong history of philosophy focus. You'll take classical philosophy and modern philosophy. Everyone gets to take logic and moral philosophy. But then the rest of your courses, there's a lot of ability to choose and shape what you want to actually study in the philosophy department. And so I think that's another really great thing about the philosophy major. Kennedy, do you have anything you want to add here?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll go ahead and say that I didn't start as a philosophy major at Baylor. I fell in love with the text after I was in the Baylor Interdisciplinary Core and had the opportunity to start reading texts like that. I don't know about any of you, but I didn't get a chance to read any text like this in high school or before I came to college. So the concept of Plato was very scary to me. But I will say that the staff here, Dr. Schultz and everyone else in the philosophy department makes these texts seem really, really palatable and helps you apply the things that you learn in these texts to the other areas of your life, including your career, your other majors, and just your interpersonal relationships. So I have found myself using philosophy every single day, especially since I've started doing the major more often, that you'll find yourself doing it involuntarily because you realize it's just a better way to live, a more efficient and clean way to live. So I absolutely recommend it.
All right, we've got one question already from Roberto Hinojosa. And can you double major or get a minor in philosophy at Baylor? Yes, you can do a full double major, but we also have these things that are called secondary majors that are a little less requirement in terms of the hours. And absolutely, you can minor in philosophy. And an interesting thing about minoring in philosophy, though this is true about majoring also, if you're in a program like the BIC program, you actually get 6 hours of credit toward your philosophy major or toward your philosophy minor for completing the first couple of years of the BIC program. And so that makes it really easy and accessible to get a minor or get a secondary major because you have that kind of little bonus from being in certain programs like the BIC. So good. I'm glad you asked that. Other questions people have?
I will also say on that as well, Roberto, also know that you can major in anything else that you want and pair it with philosophy. I had a class with one of my friends, Christopher, who is a computer science guy. And he's in university scholars, and both of his concentrations are in computer science and philosophy. So, students find so many different ways to make the philosophy major work. And I started as a minor, ended up joining as a major, but lots of people find a way to make it in a way that works for them.
All right. Oh, let's see, Nikolai Rhodes. What is the balance between classical and modern philosophy? Do the ancient philosophers Plato, Socrates, and Aristotle get more attention than philosophers like Nietzsche? Well, Plato's my favorite philosopher, and Nietzsche's my second favorite philosopher. so, if you're asking me, they would get a similar amount of time. But you saw in the requirements, which are still up, everyone who's a philosophy major has to take history of classical philosophy. So that's going to be, the pre-Socratics through maybe up through the Stoics, depending on who teaches it. And so that's really, I think we really consider that. And then the modern period, those two classes in a lot of ways, I would really say are the heart of the major, right? And so you're going to definitely get some Nietzsche in the history of modern philosophy class. We also have contemporary continental philosophy class that a lot of people who teach that class actually start with Nietzsche in that class because so many of Nietzsche's ideas shape contemporary continental philosophy. I also have a colleague, Dr. Rob Miner, who is a philosopher as well, but he teaches in the Great Text program. And he just last semester had a whole class on Nietzsche. So I teach Plato seminars. We've got a Kierkegaard scholar here. So I would say that overall, the history of philosophy is valued. If I had to kind of say broadly at Baylor, probably some of the ancient great texts kind of people probably are taught more regularly, but it certainly doesn't mean that people don't value modern and things that come after modern philosophy as well. So great question. So, all right, no open questions. Okay. All right, any more questions? I think we're kind of at our time. Okay, so. All right, well, everyone, thank you for coming and listening to us, and hope you have a great time exploring colleges, exploring and learning more about Baylor, and feel free to reach out to me or Kennedy or anyone. Oh, do Spinoza and Descartes fall under classical philosophers? Nope, they are modern philosophers. So you would study them in the second of those two classes, and they're a big part of the modern philosophy. So good question, excellent question. So, all right, way to go. Any last minute word you want to say, Kennedy?
Nothing in particular.
Okay.
I just encourage you that even if you're thinking about philosophy, take a class. That's how I started getting into it. Just take any of the classes. It's open to anyone. You won't need a permit or anything to get into any of them. Take a class. If you love it, add the major. If you don't, that's okay. You just walked away with a little more knowledge than you had before you took the class. So I just recommend trying anything and everything that you can.
All right.